That works.
Yeah, they've earned it. So have you seen the Starlink yet?
No, I live in tornado country. It's raining right now. What happens every day is the sun goes down, it gets cloudy, and then we either get a thunderstorm warning or a tornado warning. It's gotten to the point that they test the tornado system 10 a.m. the first Tuesday of every month. And when it went off yesterday, I ended up with two terrified dogs based on the alarm because they've both been flung into the basement.
Will you start getting like clear sky warnings?
What do you mean?
Like when there's not tornadoes going around, then you'll get a warning so you can go and check it out and enjoy. We have had like ridiculously clear sunny weather for we've had of course it's been the driest May here on record. How do you like your climate change? In this case, it's all right. Um, we've had a really nice spring and a
Yeah,
very
the Mississippi is higher than it's been since the historic floods of 1993, and it may yet go higher. The pump station, the water is all the way up to the railing around the pump station in the middle of Mississippi in St. Louis.
right.
The levees are starting to break.
Are you on the floodplain?
No, we are on the bluffs above the
Right.
floodplain.
Yeah, I recall going up that hill to get up
Yeah,
to where you live, so you're fine.
yeah.
You're just gonna be on an island.
Well, and like I went into St. Louis last week, and the route I would normally take, I was like, oh, this was a mistake. There's water on the road. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna say hi to a bunch of people. Hello to Bill Sugden, Douglas Friday, Grant Lanning, Johnny Zed, Larry Beckham, LKSSBBWS09. Is there like a word? Laquiz9? Michael O'Brien, Nancy Graziano, Paranor, Arinstro, Rich Wilson, Scott Bragdon, Slam RN, Susan Murph, Tom Van Scotter, William Bradley, and Zaffin Zaffin. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this very special time of Astronomy Cast. We probably won't be able to stick around long, but let's get in because I know it's late there. So we'll do the show and then probably wrap it up at that point. So, are you ready to record?
Yes.
Yay!
Shall I press record?
Wait, wait. Okay, whenever you're ready.
I am pressing record. It is recording.
I have also pressed record and can also confirm recording.
And
Hello,
Susie,
Susie.
you're going to have tree frogs to edit out.
Aw, don't edit them out. Edit them in. Double edit them. You kidding? Lay down. Hold on. Let's just be quiet, and we'll get a track of tree frogs, and then Susie can put these in at a higher level. Okay, perfect. That should be enough for her to work with. So at any point that there aren't tree frogs, you can just add tree frogs. Here we go. Astronomy Cast, episode 533, Indigenous South African Astronomy. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, our weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. I'm Fraser Kane, publisher of Universe Today. With me, as always, is Dr. Pamela Gay, a senior scientist for the Planetary Science Institute and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how are you
I'm
doing?
I'm mostly doing well. There may be inadvertent coughing. I'm
Yes,
sorry. I'm still
still
recovering from
sick.
bronchitis. I'm get
Before we
bronchitis.
get on the show, can let's do another plea for everybody to get on board Bennu Mappers.
Yes. So all of you, right now, wherever you are, open a window to bennu.cosmoquest.org. And while you listen to this show or watch it if you're here live or on YouTube, map Bennu. The OSIRIS REx spacecraft is currently orbiting this half-kilometer diameter little asteroid that is rocks on boulders, and it's just a rubble pile. And we have to somehow find a fairly clear place big enough that the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft can dive down and do rock theft with what I can only describe as a very angry vacuum cleaner that they have on board. So please, please, we have until July 10th to make it through what will ultimately be about 4,500 images. And
To
after
find a
July
spot
10th,
that doesn't
yeah.
have a lot of big boulders, that has a nice sample, and trust us, that is turning out to be very difficult to find.
Yeah, we were mistaken by the asteroid Itokawa. We thought that Bennu would be like Itokawa. In fact, the tutorial that we built before we had images of Bennu totally uses Itokawa data. And you'll see there are like tens of rocks per image, a few boulders, a clear crater here and there. Bennu is like, no, I'm going to have hundreds of objects per image. We actually had to enable compression in how we transfer the data from the front end to the back end because we were hitting the memory limits inherent in many browsers.
So if you have ever wanted to like do a science, if you've ever wanted to be one of the people to help figure out where a spacecraft should bring a sample home from, you could be the lucky person who gets an email from Pamela saying, congratulations, you identified the image that picked the landing spot, the sample spot for OSIRIS-REx. So please go to bennu.cosmoquest.org and pitch in. We've got like just over a month to find the landing spot before the scientists get really mad and they do something rash and just land wherever. So
It's more likely that all of us will just collectively cry.
right, and
So
it
if you
just
don't want
we can't
scientists
watch
to cry,
as OSIRIS-REx just blindly attempts a sample return somewhere on asteroid Bennu. All right, so let's move on to another continent this week and look at the astronomy that was going on in southern Africa in ancient times. Pamela, I don't think we had planned to do this episode last week, and then we got a delightful email from a listener thanking us for digging into the saying so many nice things about what was going on with South Africa. I don't know if this had been your plan, but it's like a whole other continent that we definitely want to add to places that had a ton of astronomy in the past and is going to be an amazing place for astronomy going into the future. So
I'm going to have to admit, this was totally
was it?
in my plan
Was it?
from the very beginning.
I had no
If you
idea.
notice, I
No.
started in America.
Uh-huh.
I went south to South America.
Yeah.
I then began traveling west, went to Australia,
And then
and the next thing west on the map is going to be
Southern
Africa.
Now we're
And
just sticking
Africa
to Southern
is
Africa.
so big. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so big we're only going to do Southern Africa.
Okay. And it works well because there are lots of really cool telescopes across various wavelengths, including one that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Some of the a Cherenkov, your favorite,
Shrinkov.
there's an
radiation?
amazing Cherenkov instrument there in southern Africa. So anyway, we're going to get into that next week, and then who knows what comes after southern Africa.
So
Europe?
I'm
Northern
thinking we
Africa?
might do Southeast Asia.
Okay.
So we've already covered a lot of archaeoastronomy in Europe.
Yeah.
So let's just linger in the places that people don't talk about very often.
Yeah, that sounds great. I love it. So, who was doing astronomy in southern Africa and when?
So we have two different groups of peoples that we're going to largely focus on that are basically two different language groups that each have a variety of tribes associated with them. Even Southern Africa is a huge region. The modern maps that we use when they're projected flat really do a disservice to Africa and a service to Greenland. Africa is huge. That's all I can really just say is that sentence over and over again.
Greenland is huge, but not as huge as the maps make you think.
Greenland is pretty tiny when compared to Africa.
Yeah.
So we're going to focus on two different peoples. The one group is the San people that are historically referred to as the Bushmen, but nowadays that phrase is often used as a pejorative. And the San people, there are a variety of different tribes and nations, with
Sorry,
many
how do you spell that?
San.
S-A-N. Okay.
Yeah. Um, and they have many different tribes and nations that have similar historic tales, and so we're going to be talking about their traditions. And these are the oldest people that have a continuous culture, perhaps in the world. There are areas where the art and the history can be traced back 70,000 years, which makes their histories make what we have here in North America, even when we look at the Anasazi, look like young. Uh, so here we're looking at some really old traditions. The other group of people that we're going to look at are the groups of people that are associated um, with the Banta people, and I may be mispronouncing it. Bantu might be a better pronunciation. So here we're going to look at the Tswani and Venda peoples and their traditions. Now, one of the amazing things to me is South Africa is really where humanity started. It is, as near as we can tell, where the very earliest modern humans walked the world. And the San people are as closely descended as we're probably going to get to those original humans, and they have this rich and amazing culture. Now, the Bantu people are a ethnically different culture. Their features are slightly different. Their language is radically different. Not the same language, not a related language. It's like comparing Swedish and Spanish. You don't. Um, and these are people that came from more northern in Africa and later moved into the San people's territories. So these are the two groups of people that we're going to be focusing on this evening.
And I'm guessing that we've got some kind of structures, artifacts, things to see how they measured the sky, or is it all again with Australia? We have stories and memories.
This is largely stories that have been passed down through the peoples, and I have to admit, one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this and have been slowly creeping up on doing this part of the world is I was given the opportunity back in 2010 to visit the South African Observatory, where the South African Large Telescope is located in, well, it's a couple hours north of Cape Town, South Africa. And in the visitor center, they have this amazing quilt where each square on the quilt is a different story. And to see all of these different stories put out in a tradition that growing up in New England, quilts are kind of like the thing you see everywhere. It kind of stayed with me. And some of these stories are truly beautiful. And the San people, pretty much everything that happens can be blamed on a young girl doing magic. And I love this power that is instilled, admittedly in a somewhat demeaning, all bad
Yeah,
things
are
are
we talking
typically
here
done girl with
witches,
magic.
bad witches doing magic, and it's their fault?
Well, why don't we take a look at the stories and see what we can see? So the first thing that I want to start with is with the San people. They are no holds barred. The stars, the sky, the heavens, that's all up there. It's a solid object. It does not affect us down here. This whole horoscopes and astrology thing that is inherent in so many different cultures in the world, not there. And and I love this, that the first peoples saw the sky, admittedly as a solid, but hey, so did Europe for a long time. Um, but they saw the sky as something that didn't influence the affairs of humans.
So there was not some vengeful god, not some chariot that was carrying a ball across the sky. It was just a thing.
Well, they had stories, but those stories didn't affect humans. Those stories were in some cases affected by humans. And in fact, the sun is one of my favorite stories. In the I'm going to mispronounce this. I'm sorry. It's the Xam San people. It's one of the larger tribes. Uh, they say that the sun was originally a very lazy man who had a really bright head. His head just shone brightly, and he liked to sleep late and keep the light to himself. And so one day, a bunch of his fellows, the very first Sun people, got frustrated with him, cut his head off, and tossed it in the sky so that it could serve everyone. And so it's up there now. It's not coming back. It's not affecting us.
Right.
And don't you be lazy because we're going to cut off your head and throw it into the sky.
And like make a second sun.
Sure, why not?
Right. Right. So sort of like a very scary version of Santa Claus to scare your children. Some story about
Yeah, I
cutting
don't think it
heads
has
off if you're
anything to do
lazy.
with
So
Santa
instead of someone who
Claus,
is going to give
but
you a lump of coal for being lazy and being a bad kid, you're going to have your head hacked off and thrown into space. Please continue.
so on the other side of things, the Swana and Verdi people, they also saw, and this is normal across most of Africa. This is a really common story. They also saw the sky as a solid vault that covers the entirety of the earth, but for them, the stars were holes in the rocky vault. So I guess that means they're holes in the rocky vault that let in sunlight. um, I'm not going to follow that one too far down, but it's an interesting variation on the story, um, and yeah, we're just going to go with there. Now, when you go down to Australia, South America, South Africa, you have completely different stars, and so some of the stories they have for those of us that live in the northern hemispheres, um, are require a bit of stepping back and looking at the context. The Southern Cross, it has two bright pointer stars, Alpha and Beta Centauri, and these are probably two of the brightest, most recognizable stars that are unique to the Southern Hemisphere. And the Tswana and Vendi traditions saw these stars as the giraffes. The two bright stars in Crux were the bright stars in Crux were male giraffes, and the pointers are female giraffes. They also look at the fainter stars in the Southern Cross as being little giraffes. So for them, this is a family of giraffes. Um, and this goes with a lot of the traditions saw stars as animals existing in the sky, not gods, not great heroes of old. We've already thrown a lazy man's head up to create the sun, um, but just the day-to-day animals they saw.
And
Uh,
that's classic, right? Like every culture adapts the constellations that they see in the sky to the things that they are familiar with. And
that's a bit terrifying if you think that the Greeks were familiar with gods coming down and smiting them from Olympus, but we'll
in
go
their
with
myth,
it.
but sure, but scorpions and
Yeah.
and and whatever they see, right? Bears. But the dipper is the plow, right? If you're not a farming society, maybe you don't see a plow, and maybe you see a spoon, or maybe you see, if it's upside down, then you see something different. So it's interesting how, I mean, you see what is familiar, and in Canada we wouldn't, I'm sure the indigenous people here never thought that. I guess they couldn't see the Southern Cross, but they wouldn't see it as giraffes, right?
And And this is where you also begin to see the things that are important to people. With the San people, ants were a fairly prominent part of their diet. They're an amazing source of protein that many people are seeing as perhaps the salvation as our environment slowly collapses. But that's a different show. So with the ready supply of ants in the area where they were living, ants were super important. And the Ksam San people thought that Canopus could influence the availability of ants' eggs. And so they called it the ant egg star. And I just find that kind of awesome. And Canopus, which is another one of the fairly bright stars in the southern hemisphere, also cropped up with the Tswana people, who saw its appearance as marking the time to breed sheep.
Right. So once again, using space as your calendar.
And so here we have all these different, so when do we do what? How do we navigate? These are the kinds of things that we see cropping up in stories all over the world. And for them, it was a matter of, you navigate by, well, keeping the Southern Cross on the right, keeping the Pleiades on your left, and walk on forward into the sunrise.
Very cool. And you said there was a whole other civilization.
So we've been going back and forth as we talk between the Tswana and Vendi people and the San people. So just comparing their different kinds of stories. Um,
So
so
there's one, and this is like again, I'm not sure how direct this is, but I did find one reference that there's a conical tower in Zimbabwe that is believed to be aligned with a supernova remnant.
that is excellent, and I have to admit that
Did
I went down the ethnographic stories and
well,
didn't come across that.
it was
So
it was actually in preparing for the show. It was actually really tough to find, unfortunately, like to find good information about all of the stuff that had been done. Like if anyone, like there was a lot of separate little bits and pieces and fragments. I've seen some mentions of some petroglyphs, but still not the same kind of really comprehensive information all in one location that you find with other places, which is too bad.
and part of this is you get buildings in places where the weather doesn't allow you to live outside. And you get buildings in places where you're building with things other than trees. So, where I live here in the United States along the Mississippi River, the Mississippian people built the largest structures that were built by humans anywhere on the earth, and no one knows about them. It's the Cahokia Mounds. They are giant dirt piles because we don't have stone here. So they piled dirt and a lot more dirt, and they made piles of dirt, and they built wooden structures on top of the piles of dirt. The wooden structures went away. And as we look at so many of these different peoples, we have their history in caves, we have their history in statues, we have their history in oral traditions, but we don't have as many of those giant stone structures. And more's the pity.
There's one location that I was able to find that was in Kenya called Namoratunga.
So I left out Kenya because it's so much further north.
So you want to just stick to Southern Africa? Okay, no problem.
Yeah,
No problem. Please
yeah,
continue.
giant continent trying to
Yeah,
stick.
no, I know, and like don't even get us started on the pyramids potentially aligning with the belt stars of Orion or not as a way to lead the UFOs in to land and help construct the pyramid. Wait,
No.
this is Astronomy Cast. Never mind. That's for that
Yeah.
other podcast that I do.
So going back, to Canopus, because why not? So the San people, the Kam tribe of the San people, saw Canopus as the ant egg star, which I find awesome. The Swana knew that it meant it was time to start breeding sheep. Now, the Venda tradition, um, to them, they had a tradition that the first person to see Canopa, which they called Naka, they needed to get themselves a black sheep horn, climb to the nearest hill, and blow the horn. And whoever did this would receive a cow as a prize.
Sweet.
Now, the reason that so many people put so much importance on Canopus is this was the star that meant winter was coming, the seasons are changing, and we need to prepare. And when you are essentially a hunter gatherer, as the San people have been and continue to be, uh, knowing it's time to hunker down and get ready for winter, that's a kind of important thing to know.
Right. And so I'm just sort of imagining, like, as the seasons change, as the, with the tilt of the earth, you're going to get this moment where, right, at a certain point, this star is going to first peak above the horizon, and that's when you know that this is starting to happen.
Yes, yes. And it wasn't just Canopus that was used to mark the seasons, because of course you have two different seasons, and the Pleiades is another one of those constellations that plays an amazingly strong role throughout all of these different peoples. And the reason is that, well, for me, that first sighting of Pleiades and Orion on the horizon when I'm coming home from work means it's winter, it's finally cooling off. Well, for them, Pleiades meant it's time to start to plant. The summer has finally come. And so here you also have these fabulous stories that are related to both the Pleiades and to the constellation Orion.
The and do they have an explanation for what the Pleiades are?
Um, well, it depends on which tribe you go to, and generally they saw it as, again, a group of animals. Um,
Group of witches.
yeah, it's at least consistent. Now the witches were generally busy throwing people into space. This let me just do a highlight reel of all the ways that this would happen. So first of all, you have in the San tradition, um, the pointer stars of the Southern Cross are lions, not giraffes, like they were with the Venda people, and these male lions used to be human beings, but a magical girl turned them into stars. So there we have one example. Our next example comes to us with the Corona Australis constellation. This is a bright ring of stars. It is clearly a ring of stars that is also sometimes referred to as the Southern Crown, and it's near the constellation Scorpius. And for them, this is a group of men who had been sitting together eating and then got bewitched when a young girl looked upon them, turning them into stars.
I think I found the reference document that you're using. Do you see the story for the Milky Way?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to next. So this is my favorite of all the stories, because I can imagine a certain amount of this is also I hate vegetables. So here in the San people tradition, the Milky Way was created by a girl of an ancient race who scooped up a handful of ashes and fire and flew it into the sky. And there had been edible roots cooking in the fire.
Yeah, she was
Um,
mad that her mom wouldn't give her some of these tasty roots, and so she grabbed the fire and threw them up into the sky,
and
having a
so I can just
tantrum.
imagine this story being told when someone's like, I don't want to eat my vegetables. And they're like, there was this girl who didn't want to eat her, who wanted her to eat her vegetables so much. She got so mad and she made the Milky Way. You are ungrateful. Eat your vegetables. Um, yeah, I don't know if that's ever happened, but
Yeah,
that's my head canon and I'm going to
yeah,
go with it.
no, that sounds good.
And this also shows that they paid attention to the colors of the stars because they saw the edible root older glowing pieces as red and the younger glowing pieces as white, creating the red and white stars that are seen along the Milky Way, which is also filled with ash from the fire, which is the darkness.
That's really cool. Did you have
So
any? Did you have any others?
oh, of
Or
course.
like, but it's more of angry women
No,
throwing
so
things into the night sky.
so it's much more of here it starts to get tied to Venus. So when Venus is an evening star, it's the dating star, and boys and girls are not allowed to date each other in public. So according and here I'm going to read from the South African Astronomical Observatory's ethno-astronomy page. Boys and girls were not allowed to date each other in public, so they would arrange a secret get together when the evening star of Venus was visible. So I just love that Venus is so bright that teenagers would sneak out under the light of Venus for a secret date,
Which you can do.
which you can do
Yeah.
because it is pretty bright.
And they would
Um,
have no light pollution. So
exactly. And the morning version of Venus, and again, people didn't always connect that the morning and evening versions of Venus are the same planet. Um, Here it was the basically the light that beckoned young girls out to do their daily chores. Um, and it's in fact so bright that one of the tribes, the Hosa, uh, they actually recognized that Venus could be seen into daylight. And this is a challenge to all of you because, hey, light pollution doesn't matter during the day. And so young boys that were out herding would challenge each other to find Venus during the day.
and you can do that today.
You can do that today. So get out there and do the thing.
Yeah, you can if you know exactly where to look, you can see Venus during the day. Uh,
So there's no exciting stories about meteors like we had with Australians. The closest we can get was that a bright meteor is a good indication of a good season ahead. But mostly they kept their traditions in the stars. And it's just a whole lot of beautiful stories. So if, like me, you grew up reading the European stories behind the constellations, get out there. And in my opinion, some of the most beautiful stories are the South African ones that are meticulously kept in a whole myriad of books. Go buy yourself a book. They're beautiful stories.
Fantastic. Pamela, do you have any story? So, and speaking of stories, do you have any names to read this week?
I do, in fact. We are, as always, so grateful to all of you out there who support us through patreon.com/astronomycast. This week, I would like to thank Jordan Young, Burry Gowan, Ramji Anmanthu, Andrew Polstra, David Troig, Brian Cagle, the giant nothing, Robert Palsma, Laura Kittleson, Les Howard, Corey Diwali, Joss Cunningham, Paul Jarman, and Emily Patterson. Thank you. You guys You guys let us keep doing this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week for, of course, the modern update. Thanks, Pamela.
Sounds good. Bye-bye. Waving at a podcast is something that makes no sense, but I do it nonetheless.
It's fine. It's fine. Mono. Save. Did I say 5:33?
Yeah.
Export. All right. We'll take like a couple of questions if someone has. Oh, you know what? Let's wrap this up. Your
I made
bronchitis
it,
is.
and then my body was just like, and you're done.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining us this week at this strange time, and that's because Pamela's going to be traveling this weekend, and then we will see all of you next week at the normal time. All right, and then I think we have 2 more episodes, and then we're going to do a live show, or at least a live audience show at the Star Party, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will be the final show for the season.
Yeah, we need to work out the numbers. There may be 2 shows that we record while we're
Okay.
face to face.
Yeah, cool. We can do that.
Okay,
Right on.
that's all I've got.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Shut it down. Hold on.